Okay, we're all good to go. So sorry about that technical difficulty at the beginning. So hello everybody, thanks for joining in. I'm really excited to have Heather Morris with us here today, and I also have Karina who's joining us, Karina Kilmore, so she's one of Global Girls associated authors. So thanks both for joining me. A little bit about Heather for those who don't know Heather. Heather was born in New Zealand. She's an international #1 best-selling author who is passionate about stories of survival, resilience, and hope. In 2003, while working in a large public hospital in Melbourne, Heather was introduced to an elderly gentleman who might just have a story worth telling. That day, she met Lali Skokalov and changed both their lives. Heather used Lali's story as the basis for The Tattooist of Auschwitz, which, alongside the follow-up, Chilka's Journey, have sold 8 million copies worldwide. And Three Sisters is her latest novel. So I've got my copy there, and you can see Heather's in the background there. And just want to say to people watching that thanks to Echo Publishing, if you ask a question during the Facebook Live, you'll have a chance to win a copy of Three Sisters. So thanks so much, Heather, for joining us. Just wondering if you want to start off by telling us a little bit about Three Sisters.
Oh, look, certainly. Thank you, Jackie. Kia ora. Hello, everybody.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Remember these names: Livia, Magda, and Sibi. When you read Three Sisters, these are the girls I'm talking about. 15, 17, and 19 years of age in April 1942, when the Nazis came knocking on their door. They took away Livy at the 15 and Sibi, the 19-year-old, to Auschwitz. Magda, she was in hospital on that day and so avoided being taken then and there. So Three Sisters, well, it's actually got several sort of components to it. I introduced in the very beginning to the girls as girls, young girls, and a promise they make to their father that they will never get separated. They will look after each other. They will be there for each other. I'm giving away a bit of a spoiler at the very beginning, but if you pick the book up in a bookshop, you're going to read the first 2 pages and read this anyway. The day they made that promise, Livy was only 3, 5 and 7. They did not know that their father would die the next day. So based on that promise made as little girls, now separated, they had to find a way back together again. Who wants to reconnect as siblings in Auschwitz in the middle of a Holocaust? So the story is of the 2 girls who went there initially, Sibi and Livia, and in tandem, the story tells of Magda back home in Slovakia with her mother and grandfather and her survival until she was caught and taken to Auschwitz. That these sisters found each other in those incredible circumstances. Over 100,000 prisoners in there at any point in time. Everyone segregated into blocks, into small areas, so there was no mixing. And still they found each other 2.5 years later. They survived a death march, which, really I should have told that story as a book in its own. It's an incredible storyline. When they were finally liberated, got back to Slovakia, when nothing much had changed as far as anti-Semitism was concerned. So they made the decision to move to Israel. So the last part of the book is about these young women now moving to Israel as that pivotal point in history when Palestine and Israel were sparring it out and the nation state of Israel was created. And now I get to tell you about what it was like at that time in history in Israel through the eyes of young girls and the young boys, the boys they met and married and had families with, not through the eyes of the politicians and the bureaucrats. 3 young girls, Livy, Magda, Sibi.
That's fabulous introduction. Thank you, Heather. You like to base your novels. Now, this is a third in, what do you call it? What sort of series do you have a name for it, or?
No, not really, because it's not really a trilogy because they all stand alone.
Yeah, they do.
It
Yeah,
helps if you've read, well, it doesn't even help because you're introduced to the other characters, but
yeah, they are connected though, aren't they? And you like to
connected, but we
base,
went away from that word trilogy in the end.
yeah, yeah, and you like to base your stories on true life, and this is another one that you've done that with. Why have you chosen that way of storytelling?
Because I think real life and real people, ordinary people who live through extraordinary times, have got stories to be heard. And I love telling them. I think I've found a way to be able to write their stories in a way that is relatable to readers of all ages. Primarily because I don't know any other way to write. But in honouring the stories that are given to me, I like to tell them in the voice and the words of those people who lived that experience.
Yeah. So tell us the background of the three sisters. Are they three real sisters? You know,
absolutely. And if you want to, anyone who does get the book, even if you sneak into a bookshop, just flick to the back of it and have a look at the photos that are in there. We have many, many photos of these three girls from very little right through to elderly women. Two of them are still alive, Magda and Livy. They're 96 and 98. And I've been really annoyed at COVID for many reasons, but probably the primary one is that it's kept me from being able to go back to Israel and spend more time with them. Why have I told their story? Because their story came to me, just like Lully's came to me. I'm meeting a friend who introduced me. I was in South Africa. I was at a book festival there in Franschhoek when I read an email one day. Well, actually, it was the early hours of the morning. Now, by the way, Franschhoek is a wine region, and I've been out taking advantage of what grew in the wine region. I've read an email 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and it was from a man he lives in Canada, in Toronto. He had picked up a copy of The Tattooist of Auschwitz, and I'm so grateful that Canada took the same cover as Australia. Otherwise, I would never have got the story. Out of 55 countries, only Canada and Brazil have the same cover as we have in Australia. They're all different.
Gosh.
He picked up the copy and he took it to Tel Aviv to visit his mother, left it on her coffee table. She walked past, looked down at it, and said to him, "That must be about Lully and Gita." When he said to her, "How could you possibly know that?" She said, "Look at the number on the arm of that girl on the photo. Now look at mine. It's 3 away. Your Auntie Sibby's was 2 away. Gita was just in front of us. We went to school with Gita. We were on the train coming to Auschwitz with Gita. Gita had been in their lives up until Gita died when she visited Israel."
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, no, that's really amazing hearing that. We've got lots of people watching, which is really great. We've got someone says they're from Switzerland, someone from the US watching, and I know a lot of people from Australia are watching as well. I've got a question from Marja. So she said, you've obviously heard a lot of different stories. How do you decide which story ends up in your book?
They just somehow speak to me. When I flew from South Africa, I didn't come home. I didn't come back to Australia like I was meant to. I flew straight from Johannesburg to Tel Aviv. And I walked into the apartment and into the arms of Livy. And within hours, I knew that this woman and her family and her extended family were people I wanted to get to know better. It is a matter of hearing incredible stories, and I've got so many more out there.
Yeah, that's what I'm want. Yeah,
it's just something, I can't even name it. I can't put my finger on it. But when you read it and when you hear it and when you speak to somebody, you go, bang, that's it.
So, yeah, I'm interested to know how many more stories have you got from these original books?
I look, probably more than I've got years to live in.
Yeah.
It's pretty obvious I'm no spring chicken. But it is a matter of deciding, hand in hand with my publishers, because you've got to have somebody prepared to publish them, what stories are suitable to tell next, whether to stay in the Holocaust. There are so many I have there, whether to find another part of recent history, and primarily I'm talking about conflict times. that's where I find these incredible people, the bravery and the courage of the ordinary person, the civilian, the collateral damage, whatever you want to call them. They're the stories I like to tell.
And it sounds like you make a really personal connection with them as well.
Yeah, I do. I have these extended families everywhere now, and some of the children of the sisters call me sister is pretty amazing. I was meant to have been in Israel 4 or 5 days ago at the wedding of one of Livia's granddaughters, and I had to watch it on a live stream instead. Yes, very much part of their families.
Wow. What is your writing history, Heather? How did you start writing?
Got to that point in life, Karina, when, you might not have got there yet. Your children stop saying to you, hey, Mum, can you drive me somewhere? Instead, it's, hey, Mum, can I have the car keys? And when that happens, you then find, okay, I've got a bit of time on my hands. I've got the full-time job. That's great. And I sat down, I had a conversation with myself one day, and I said, what do you want to do? Do you want to be selfish and see if there's something you want to do for yourself? I answered that very simply. All my life, my family accused me of being a storyteller. The way they put it, it was not a positive thing. So I loved movies, and I thought, well, why don't I try learning how to write a movie? So I I did a lot of online courses. I did weekend seminars and all kinds of workshops, learning how to write a screenplay. Why a screenplay? Because I discovered that writing a screenplay comes with rules. It's got a formula. And unless you're Quentin Tarantino, you do not get to deviate. So I was able to follow these simple rules, which they're not really simple, but the structure of it is. What it does do, though, folks, is it teaches you how to write from a structural point of view. You know, in writing a screenplay, you've got to get X number of beats in the first 10 pages. You've got to have 3 acts. You've got to do this, that, and the other. Emotional arcs, you learn that. So Lully's story, The Tattooist of Auschwitz, it existed as a screenplay for about 15 years because I stubbornly hung on to it. And it was only visiting my sister-in-law and brother who live in San Diego and complaining about those sods 100 miles up the road in Hollywood, who wouldn't know a decent story if it hit them over the head, that my sister-in-law just leant over the table and went, oh, for goodness sake, write the thing as a book and get on with it. She was sick of hearing me. So I looked, I don't know how to do that, but I'll give it a go. So I gave it a go.
And that was your first novel. That was your debut novel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Incredible story. And you've sold millions of copies now.
Yes, very fortunate. I struggle to process what my publishers tell me is a phenomenon to be having this story and these stories like Silka and now Three Sisters in something like 55 countries and 47 translations.
Yeah.
I just choose not to think about it. Get on with the next one.
Yeah.
And
now, Heather, we have a similar background. I'm from Te Awamutu as well.
No way.
Yes way. So along with you and Neil and Tim Finn, of Split Ends and Crowded House fame, there's you and me now.
Did you go to college?
No, I didn't go to college there. I'd left by then, but yeah.
I was back there a couple of years ago, just before COVID hit us all. And I went and gave a talk to some kids at Te College. This is my old stomping ground, folks. And while I was there, and I met the principal, and I wasn't a particularly good student, both academically and behaviourally. But I have now had my name put on that board at Te College underneath the Finn boys.
You're famous. Absolutely.
When you make it to Te College on a board, yeah, you do. Anyway.
You do.
Oh, well, that's lovely to chat to you. We should talk a little bit more, perhaps off air.
We will, yeah, that'd be lovely.
I've got a question from Jill. She's wondering what you like to read and maybe if you've got any favourite authors you could share with us.
The kind of stories I read more often than not are the, I shouldn't say forgettable, that's doing a disservice to their authors, isn't it? But I'm talking about the David Baldacci, the Lee Child, the Michael Crichton. I love crime, police procedural. Those are the stories that I just sit there and go through. But on the other hand, I also do like to get into the stories of, say, Hilary Mantel, those beautifully written historical novels. Really been caught up in the last few years by reading many historical novels which have come out centered around the Holocaust.
Yeah.
And some of them are just absolutely brilliant. I mean, The Last Train to London, just brilliant. Yeah. But look, I like to kick back and give me a good Lee Child. Baldacci.
Well, as a crime fiction writer, I'm right there with you. I love crime fiction.
Yay!
And TJ's got an interesting question. She said, do you wonder when you first started writing about the Holocaust that people might be scared to read it? Your books have been beautiful and painful at the same time.
Oh, look, great question, TJ. I think because I'd never written anything before, I never had any baggage that gave me concerns or gave me worries. I couldn't understand why anybody wouldn't want to read about this incredible story about Lali and Gita. Here I had this beautiful love story. Yes, its setting was horrific, but at its heart, it's this incredible love story. So probably not a good answer to say I didn't consider it. I thought if I wrote the stories in simple language and used the words that Lali used, that people might relate to them. And it seems to have been borne out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the prisoner of war situation is a very fraught topic for many, and will go on for many generations. So there is sort of a reluctance, or there can be a reluctance about people reading it and being afraid of the content. But your books are just, within all that horrible setting, they're just filled with love, basically.
Yeah, look, we think that a large part of the success of the book has actually come from word of mouth. That one person has picked it up, someone's recommended, and the incredible stats we have to show that it has been that word of mouth as opposed to sort of great publicity marketing machines. Let's face it, why would publishers in London who were publishing me for the first time want to invest in trying to get the world to know about my story? For that to happen is phenomenal.
Yeah, that's great.
I'm so grateful that that's happened.
Yeah.
And I've had someone as young as 9 years of age write to me and tell me what reading the book meant to her. And I've had them in their 90s write to me. I think it's incredible that I remember the publishers early on when we were doing all that negotiation stuff, they said to me, well, who's your target audience? And of course, being a green skin, I kind of went, well, anybody that wants to read it, I guess. Thought about writing it to target an age group or a demographic of any sort. It was, you want to read it? Read it.
Yeah. And that's proved to be the case, because the readership is wide and vast.
It's even published in Iran. The first book, my publishers, which are 200 years old, my publishers, the first book that they have got translated in Farsi and published in Iran.
Wow, that's amazing. Oh, congratulations.
Yes, Chattus and Silka, and they've picked up Three Sisters as well.
Wow. And I've got a question from Helen that I can really relate to as well. She wonders if you've always been interested in history, and she says that she's found as she's got older, she gets a lot more interested in history, which I have to say that I've found myself.
I'm with you too. If I could find or see my book school reports that's related to that subject matter, it would be a definite, if for fail. My little bit of history or interest in history came from a very significant person in my life, and I wrote about him in the book Stories of Hope, and that's my great-grandfather. I lived very close to my great-grandfather, 2 paddocks away, and spent a lot of time with this amazing old man. Now, he had actually been, as a young teenager, in South Africa during the Boer War.
Mm.
He had gone over there with the New Zealand soldiers. Shouldn't have, he was underage. But I used to spend, days, weeks, months, years with him and letting him tell me about that period in history. And I was fascinated by that.
Mm.
In the rest of it, well, I'm kind of blame the New Zealand education system just quietly. It didn't seem to make it interesting enough for me.
Mm. And Kim has a good question. She said your books are so moving, especially knowing that they are true stories. How do you cope with your emotions while writing them?
Great question again. It comes in. There's two answers to it. Well, there's probably three. The third one is an explanation. For over 20 years, I worked in the social work department at a large hospital in Melbourne.
Mm.
Now, working there, where every day I met people, either patients or their carers, who were there because something tragic or traumatic had happened to them. And so, in terms of being able to work in that environment for 20 years, to be able to help somebody, we knew, everyone working in that environment, that you have to just listen and engage with the person, always remembering not your pain, not your trauma, not your guilt, and you have no right to even think you can own any part of it. So you're able to almost disassociate from it at one level. But here's the weird thing that happens when it comes time to writing. I can sit down in front of my computer and I can write for hours, and I can write the most horrific, evil things that I know happen to people who are now part of my life. And it's just bang, 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 nothing. And it's not until the next day when I say to myself, oh, I better go back and read what I wrote yesterday to just see if it needs to play with it. I actually can't read my own writing because then I become this absolute mess.
Oh, well.
So I can disassociate while I'm writing, but not when it's reading. So I rely on pretty good editors to then help me out.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, we've got just getting a sign to say that the internet is unstable. Is that?
I think it might just be you.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. I'm good.
Because you froze for a few seconds.
Oh,
Yeah.
Sorry. I'm down on the Great Road.
Yes, she is unstable.
Yeah,
Jackie, take it away.
Yeah. I've got a question from Sue. So she's got an interesting question. Why are your books written as fiction and not non-fiction?
Thank you. Love this question. Love answering it. When I got the contract to publish The Tattooist, the publisher said to me, this is a memoir. Okay, so go and write a memoir. I didn't know how to write a memoir. I just admitted to you a little while ago I didn't know how to write anything. So I actually I found a course, a 5-day course in how to write a memoir in Melbourne. I went there for one day because I knew after that first day I could not tell Lolly's story in that way. After many conversations about how to do it, and I was told, well, write it in the third person, now write it this way. I'm giving it a go, and it's just not working for me. When writing a memoir or a biography, you are totally restricted by the rules of those genres to writing what the person whose story you're telling saw and witnessed and experienced. You don't get to have anything else going on around them that they didn't see. So imagine if I told Lolly's story and I couldn't tell you what was going on with Gita and the girls part, what was going on with regard to the SS and the machinery, the SS machinery there. You can't do that when writing in those other genres. By labeling it historical fiction gave me the permission now to use Lolly's words. I'd spent 3 years with this man. He's in my head, he's in my heart.
Yeah.
And I have no trouble whatsoever being able to regurgitate and tell his story in his words. I guess I was very lucky that the publishers that I went with, in the end, they just said to me, oh, for goodness sake, just write the book the way you want it told. So, very lucky that I wasn't forced to tell it another way.
And could you tell us a little bit about your publishing story? Did you have to approach a few before you found one that was interested in your book?
Oh dear, this is what other authors don't like hearing. It's pretty obvious that I'm on the other side of 50, 60, carry on. When I made that decision from my sister-in-law saying to me, write the damn thing as a book, I went, I haven't got time to be sending. I said, oh, how do I do that? And someone said, well, you've got to try and get an agent. So send out query letters and then send out query letters to publishers. And I went, I ain't got time for this. So one of my sons is a short filmmaker in Melbourne. And he and his partner, his work partner, they were the first Australians to do what's called a crowdfunding request on Kickstarter, which is Amazon in the US. And he said to me, he said, listen, Mum, you know, we went onto Kickstarter to raise some money and make aware this project you're working on. I went, yeah. He said, do that. He said, you don't need the money, I know that. But if you do end up self-publishing, then it will help. But what you will do is you will make the world aware of the story you've got. So there still exists on Kickstarter today a 3-minute video that I made, plagiarized some Holocaust sort of film, some beautiful music, and I just sat and talked about the story I had, and publishers came to me.
Oh, wow.
I am yet to get a rejection letter.
Wow.
Oh, what an amazing story.
Can I tell you that other authors are doing this now too? I've spoken about it all throughout the United States and other parts of the world, and many, many others. I get emails saying, I did what you did. I've got a publisher because they've got the right story.
Wow.
Wow. That's fantastic. I must go and find it, Heather, and watch.
You'll see I would have aged a bit. It was actually only about 2016 or 17, so it was just not long before I then did write the book, and it came out in 2018.
Yeah, cool.
And Jill's wondering if you've got a regular writing routine.
My publishers aren't watching this, are they? No, I don't see them. No, they probably wish I did. If there's any routine at all, it's writing at night where there are no distractions. So I'm a 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. kind of gal.
Oh, really?
Otherwise, I will look for any distraction going, even if it's just a bird flying past the window. That'll do it. So mostly at night. But I'm one of these people who get behind a little bit in delivery and then just go, okay, got to do it.
Yeah.
And so then you just knuckle down and do it.
And when you're writing, do you have a favourite snack or drink?
M&Ms, peanut M&Ms.
Oh.
And just water.
Yeah.
None of that red stuff.
Not when I'm serious.
And tell us about listening, Heather.
It's weird, isn't it, that I would write a book about listening? Because actually, once again, getting this story and how that came about is a story in itself. It was when I was in Slovakia doing research for Silke's story, and I was there with my lovely publisher, or one of them from London, who, by the way, is also a Kiwi.
Cool.
So she's in London. And she and I went to Slovakia, and we'd spent the day with these people who had known Silke for decades. I'd sat in the very apartment that Silke and her husband had lived in for 50 years, and then gone next door to Mr. and Mrs. Samueli's apartment. And while sitting there with 2 translators, because I don't speak any Slovakian, and the majority of Slovakian people don't speak much English, but for over a period of many hours, the people who have lived in that apartment building for decades all came in to sit with me and to tell me their stories.
Oh, wow.
That was the most humbling experience I've ever had, being in that room with these people.
Yeah.
In Slovakia, by the way, you get given a place to live and you're there for all your life. You don't upsize, downsize like we do.
Yeah.
And later on that evening, Margaret and I were back in the hotel, and we, after dinner, wandered into this little bar to have a drink. And Margaret said to me, she said, I was just totally captivated watching you and these Slovakian people aging from, say, 40 to well into their 90s, how you engage with them and you didn't even understand them, but I was hearing enough for my translators behind me. How they opened up to you and told you these incredible things. You know, once or twice, Margaret had tried to ask a question, and they just really ignored her. She said, "What were you doing that I wasn't?" And maybe it was the port speaking, I don't know, but I just said, "Oh, it's simple, really. I was listening." And they knew I was listening.
Yeah.
I wasn't making notes. I wasn't recording. And she said, "How did you know to do that?" And I said, simple, my great-grandfather, the one I spoke earlier about, he taught me. He taught me as a young girl that if I just shut up and listen to whatever's going on around me, be it the cows coming in, which dog's barking, even though you can't see it, whose tractor is that you can hear? Is that Vic Harper or is that Bill Smith's down the road? That by actively listening, you hear and you remember.
Yeah, that's remarkable. As a journalist, that's my main function, is to listen. But it's very hard to take in so much information. You weren't even taking notes or recording.
No, yeah, when talking to people like Lully and these people in Slovakia and now Livy and Magda, I seem to find that if I just sit there and listen, I hear the words, I see the emotion on their face, I interpret their body language. Are they getting uncomfortable? And I need to now step in and shut them down. And I retain it. I definitely retain it long enough to be able to get home and make notes down then on my computer.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe we've all got to have something freaky about us, don't we? Maybe that's mine.
That's a fantastic skill. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
really
it can be
is.
learned.
I don't know. I think my memory's too old now. It's already failing.
I might dispute that.
And I've got a lot of people who are asking, what's next for Heather Morris?
Well, she's asked if she can have a little bit of time off. We do have, I think, the next story that we're going to go with. We're not announcing it or making it public just yet. I put out 4 books in under 4 years, and I don't think I've been able to enjoy them as much as I would. I love all the travelling, and come on, Qantas, get back in the air, please. I've already got a flight booked to LA in January. I'm that optimistic. But I've asked, can I now go and do the next book tour, which I'll do for the 3 sisters throughout Europe and the US and other countries. But can I not do it at the same pace that I've done the other 2? I got to tell you, flying into Prague in the morning, being on morning television an hour later, doing an afternoon event and an evening event, and then flying to Budapest the next day, and then on and on. And I think it was the day when I was in the US where I woke up in Boston and did an interview that morning on TV, flew to Chicago in the afternoon, did 2 events in Chicago, and then at 11 o'clock that night, flew to Toronto in Canada, not even getting an overnighter in Chicago. I want to see these places. I want to enjoy them. I want to mix more in bookstores with readers and hang out. So, yes, as the book has been translated, and it will come out in all these European countries around about May, June. So already I'm booked to now head to Europe and do it slowly.
And what
that sounds lovely.
Can I have some time off, please?
Yes.
And what do you like to do to relax when you do have time off?
I never thought I'd be one of these people to say this, but I really am a doting grandma.
Nice.
And I really love hanging out with the little people in my life. In terms of other activities, I still love movies. Please get me out of this quarantine so I can go and see James Bond as soon as it's out. I did do a lot of sport when I was younger, even younger. I was part of veterans athletics and throwing discus and shot puts and hammers and things. I do like to keep physically active, not so much in the last couple of years. But don't worry, I'll keep myself busy.
Yeah, I'm sure you will.
And could you tell us, for you, what do you think makes a good story?
We've all got a good story in us. What makes a good story is having somebody listen to what may not be a good story, but see the depths behind it. and interpret what's not being said. Just talking to anybody, I'm sure that I could just sit down with either one of you and we'd just start gasbagging away. And before I knew it, you'd be telling me something that for you is possibly just a throwaway part of your life. There's a story in it. I think the best stories really are what I said before. They're about ordinary people who live and survive in extraordinary times.
Yeah.
We are all surviving in extraordinary times right now.
Yeah.
Here's the bummer of this. I'm not sure that we will want to go and read pandemic novels because we all
No.
No, I definitely don't want to.
And I certainly don't want to write one.
No.
And yeah, and I find it really interesting what you're saying about everyone having stories and that. I myself have been looking a bit more into my family history and found some quite interesting stories. Just wondering, is that something you like to, you did mention your great grandfather. Do you like looking into your own family history more? And is that something you might write some more about?
I'm not going to write anything more about it. I'm fascinated about the amount of my family history that I don't know. And I have 4 brothers and we grew up together. And people who've got siblings will know this. You see and you hear and you interpret things that you are both present at differently. So I have enjoyed the last couple of years talking to my siblings. And hearing, well, do you remember such and such? I go, yeah, that happened and that happened. I went, no, it didn't.
Yeah,
I go,
and
"No,
they
yeah,
know
we
something
did."
totally different than.
Yeah, we've all got them, and it's just lovely to record them for no other reason than for your own family history. Because my kids now, who do not know my grandparents and my great grandparents and those other generations, they now want to know about them.
Yeah.
They're kind of holding to me to try and write some of that down just for them.
That would be a recipe for family squabble in my family, Heather. Yes, that's right.
He said, she said, come on. You have the dual narrative happening. I read it happened this way, but my brother says that.
That's right.
There's a story in that.
There is.
Because these 3 sisters, so coming back to the book, I suppose we should talk about it occasionally. It's the thing, they all witnessed and experienced the same thing differently. I can talk to Livy and I can talk to Magda. I couldn't talk to Sibby. But what I did get to help me with Sibby was she had made a Shoah Foundation videotape some 30 years ago. So I got access to this incredible 2 hours of Sibby telling her story. Now, it was all in Hebrew, so I had to get it translated. And so I got the translation, read the translation, and from the words, I thought, okay, I'm getting a bit of a feel about this woman, because I had to write these women as girls as well, stages of their life. And then I sat down and I watched her 2-hour videotape with the sound off, because I couldn't understand a word, but I did it deliberately because I wanted to see what Sibby did being interviewed. I wanted to see her body language. I wanted to hear or interpret her facial expressions. And in watching those 2 hours, I got Sibby. I got this woman who was then in her 70s, cocky, self-sure, confident of who she was in the world. She was the sister, the 19-year-old, who the other 2 credit with saving their lives, because she took it up to the Nazis. She did not back down. They freely admit, including Sibby, I should have been shot 10 times over. And so, but once again, what she said in her tape wasn't what Libby, who was right there with her, saw and interpreted. So you have to get that balance in telling these 2 stories. And then Magda comes into the mix. Come on, now go, let's throw spirit in.
And the things you found out from your research must have been amazing. Just wondering if there's anything you'd like to share with us that you found that really amazed you and think that would be interesting to share to everyone watching.
Well, the first and most amazing thing is for 3 sisters to survive the Holocaust, not just the Holocaust, but Auschwitz-Birkenau for nearly 3 years. It's pretty rare. I know of other Holocaust survivors who did not, lost siblings. It's as simple as that, even when they were taken in together. That is amazing. Because of COVID, I could not go back to Slovakia to do the hands-on research there that I wanted to do in the girls' hometown of Ronov. I've been able to do that with Lully and also with Silka. But I didn't use, it's the wrong word. I had a friend who lives in Lully's hometown of Krimpaki, who speaks really good English. She's actually an English teacher there, Slovakian woman. She went to Brunov. I said, can you just go there and see what you can get from the authorities about the sisters and their life in Slovakia? And she was there one day and she got on the phone to me here in Melbourne. It was nighttime for me. And she was in the office that had all the big journals of the births, the deaths, and the marriages. And I'd given her the names and the dates of birth of the girls. Go and find them, because they're all recorded, not on computers there, but in these big journals. And she rings me up and she said, I can't find Livy. I can't find a Livy or Olivia Mallett anywhere. And that date of birth you gave me, it's just not gelling. And I said, oh, that's crazy. That's her name. That's her date of birth. She said, look, we went back exactly 1 year. She said, and we found an Esther Mella, 1 year older than Livy. Could it be the same person? I said, who knows? For some reason, Slovakians are very good at shortening their names, changing their names, playing around with their names. So I said, look, the date of birth, except for the year, is tying up, then yeah, that's our Livy. So I had to tell Livy a few days later, hey, listen, honey, you're not 95, you're 96. And she said, hey, at my age, I'll take it. But then she kept going. And we found, and she said to me, she rang me up again, because she'd ring me and we'd have a chat about what she's found. And she said, do you want to know about the fourth sister? I went, there's no fourth sister. There's just 3. And she said, well, I've just kept looking through this book and I found a fourth sister. Her name was Amelia. And Amelia was born 3 months after their father died. And then she went and looked, and I said, look, I've never heard of her. She said, okay, I'll go now and start looking through the death records. And 3 years later, she found a death record for Amelia. And so I asked the family back in Israel, have Livy or Magda ever mentioned another sister, Amelia? And they went, no, there was just the 3 of them. Now, Livy is the one who speaks really good English. She's the one who I see and stay with most of the time when I'm there. And I said to her daughter, I said, can you ask her? Just, find a way to ask her. And she did. And Livy said, there's not a day goes by that Magda and I don't talk about Amelia and think of Amelia. Yes, she was our baby sister.
Hadn't she? Yeah. Wow.
And then through the sisters and through, Livy and Magda, Sibby's not with us, but to her boys and to Magda's girls, I found out first that their fathers had families before them and had lost entire families in the Holocaust. Wives and children.
Wow.
So, there are these things that kind of pop up.
Yeah.
The family is very, very grateful to me. And then look, here's the great thing: those wonderful Slovakian authorities produced authentic birth certificates and a death certificate for Amelia and a death certificate for their dad, because he found his death details, and they now have these official records I've never had before.
Yeah, that's lovely. Yeah.
And I've got a good question from MJ. She is wondering about the people whose stories you've written about. Have they read your books?
Yeah, look, absolutely. Lally never got to read the book, but his story existed as a screenplay for many years, and he read many, many drafts. We had actually been trying to get it made by a production company in Melbourne into a film. I got close, and he was part of that with the producers and the directors. So my adaptation of his story is solid because he had written and approved the screenplay. And with regard to the sister's story, before it went anywhere near, even outside of just 1 or 2 editors, the manuscript got sent to the families in Israel. 3 generations The girls, their children, and their adult grandchildren got the chance and had the chance and did read the manuscript before it was seen by anybody else. And they have all signed off on the manuscript that you now read as their book. You know, look, because it's an interesting little aside, if I may, humour me here. There was only one thing other than I love the fact that I said to him, don't worry about the spelling and the grammar and that, but they did. Some of them spent ages correcting that, which was lovely. But there was one thing that they said to me, I got wrong. Livy and Magda said, I got that so wrong. You must rewrite that. And it was a scene, and I'm happy to talk about it because it doesn't interfere with the storyline of the book or you possibly wanting to read it. But it was the one time that I let my own personal emotions interfere with my writing. And I remember it happening, but I kept doing it. I didn't stop. I think I thought maybe I can get away with it. And at the end of the war, when the girls had been liberated and they were in a displaced persons camp in Germany, while survivors were being rounded up from the camps, and then they were put on buses and or taken to their country of origin. So of course the girls were taken back to Czechoslovakia. Now, there were about 4 buses of Czechoslovakian young boys and girls this day that travelled in a convoy from Germany through to Prague. As they came into Prague and over that Wenceslas bridge, I can't say that properly, this incredible, the bridge that's there, people lined the streets and the bridge, throwing flowers at the buses to them, clamouring on board the buses and pressing money into the hands of these returning survivors, handing them baskets full of food. And the buses were taken into the main square in Prague, where the mayor or one of the head officials had this big speech and welcomed them home. And when I was writing that, because the girls had told me all about it, I was angry, and I let my anger at how could these people, the people of Prague, who sent these young boys and girls away, who cost them their families, how dare they think they can now welcome them back and all that? So I was mighty, I was going to use a different word there, uptight. I was, really got to me. And I let that reflect in how I wrote those scenes of their return. And the sisters wrote back to me through their family saying, you got that so wrong. That was the happiest day of our lives. A lesson to be learned, isn't there? Fellow fiction writers out there, you do have to stay detached.
Well, thanks so much for talking to us. It's been so interesting chatting to you.
My pleasure, ladies.
We could talk to you for hours, I'm sure.
Absolutely, yeah.
To all those people who've tuned in and any others who watched this, thank you so much. Thank you for supporting my books. They are my books, but they are not my stories. Thank you for supporting my books and the other stories.
And
lots of word of mouth going on.
Yes.
And thanks so much to everyone who's tuned in, and we've had some great questions.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Karina.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.